Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad, and a very warm welcome to Sunday's edition of the DC Universe Daily. So today I'm just going to ramble about a few things. I may just ramble about one thing. I've got no plan. So the first thing I want to talk about today, and it may be the only thing, I just don't know. Let's get into it, is why hasn't a modern day Superman film made $1 billion? I can give you reasons why every good movie in the history of Hollywood hasn't made enough money. I can give you the reasons within the movie. I can tell you why BVS didn't make $1 billion, even though I think it's a great movie. It was mismarketed and missold about something. Like, people thought it was something that it wasn't. So when people actually went to see the movie, they went, oh my God, that's not the movie we were sold. This is not the movie we want. But if they were honest in the marketing, I think a lot more people would have gobbled BVS up and enjoyed it. And I think it would have definitely crept at least to $1 billion. But I think the studio wanted a lot closer than $2 billion, if you ask me. So why hasn't a modern day Superman movie made $1 billion? And it's absolutely clear the Superman legacy absolutely has to get as close to $1 billion as possible, be reviewed and loved. This is last chance saloons for Superman. If this doesn't work, we won't see Superman again for a very long time. In James Gunn, we trust because we got no choice but to trust him. He's the one who's got Superman in the palm of his hands. And hopefully for the first time in decades, someone's looking after Superman properly. Why didn't Superman Returns and Man of Steel make $1 billion? I think it's actually quite self-explanatory. Let's look at Superman Returns. I've watched this movie many times. As a Superman fan, I don't hate this film, but this film has many, many problems. Now, Bryan Singer is a great director, but Bryan Singer was the problem for this movie because by the end of production, he was barely turning up. He wasn't turning up on time. And you could tell by the end of the movie, the VFX also got a bit ropey by the end. And Superman Returns has some stunning VFX, by the way. So Bryan Singer was working on X-Men. He was working, preparing for X-Men 3. Then he had an idea, probably while he was stoned, knowing Bryan, that he wanted to do a Superman movie. He wanted to make a sequel to Superman 2. So, when I first heard about Superman Returns and it being a sequel to Christopher Reeve's Superman 2, I was really, really excited. I grew up on Christopher Reeve's Superman. Why wouldn't I be, really hyped and jacked about this? It was exciting. What does the box office for Superman Returns tell us? It can either tell us that people didn't want a continuation of a decades-old Superman franchise, or that it was badly executed and it didn't feel like a sequel to Superman 2. I'd say the reasons are a bit of both. I think lots of people didn't want a sequel to Superman 2. That's one of the reasons people didn't come out to support the movie. But also Superman Returns, apart from using John Williams' theme and themes, doesn't actually feel like a sequel to Superman the movie or Superman 2. Let's not forget, in Superman 2, Superman fights the 3 villains from Krypton, including Zod. In Superman Returns, they don't mention those 3 villains once. They don't talk about anything really that much that's gone before. They don't really talk about Superman 2. They talk about Superman the movie. They mention like the interview I spent the night with Superman by Lois Lane and stuff like that. So they do mention some stuff in there. There's obviously that line when he saves the plane. That planes are reliable and flying's the safest way to travel and all that. But ultimately, Superman 2 is rarely mentioned, apart from the fact that Superman and Lois sleep with each other, and that's how, Lois conceived her son, Jason. And there's that other situation within the movie, which was slightly problematic, which I'll get into and a minute. So people didn't really want a continuation, and also it wasn't executed. The Daily Planet building doesn't look like the one from the Superman era movies. You know, it's modernized. I can understand buildings being modernized, but that just seems like a totally different building. Metropolis doesn't look like the Metropolis from Dick Donner's movie or Richard Lester's Superman 2. So it's not recognizable. So that's a problem as well. And also, nobody asked for this. Lex Luthor, Kevin Spacey plays a great Lex Luthor, but if you ask Kevin whose Lex Luthor this is modelled on, he says he was inspired from the stuff he saw Michael Rosenbaum do on Smallville. So that tells you a little bit, it doesn't feel, so this is a sequel to Superman 2, but Kevin Spacey's Lex Luthor is nothing like Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor. Yeah, his motivations again are for land and all of that, like in Superman the movie, but his personality doesn't feel like Gene Hackman. And because Michael Rosenbaum's Lex Luthor on Smallville, and he's a businessman in Smallville and all of that, and to go back to this hackneyed idea of Lex Luthor being a con man rather than this intelligent businessman we saw in Smallville was a bad idea. We'd already seen a superior Lex Luthor, in Smallville. And even though Spacey is a great Lex Luthor in that film, it simply doesn't work. And the movie falls to pieces. And then we come to, Lois conceiving Superman's son, Jason. You see, this should never have been a thing. Now, I don't mind them doing Connor Kent. Now, clearly, Singer isn't a comic book fan. We know that from a lot of his friends and people that have worked with him before. So he didn't know much about Superman. If he did, he would have had Jason be Connor Kent. That would have made a lot more sense, and that would have been a more compelling story to tell. But he didn't. So that element of it really didn't work either. Now, it is a good film in places. It does work in places, and in other places, it doesn't work. And that's why that film never made $1 billion. That film never had a chance of making $1 billion. And even though I was a little bit more naive about the industry back then, and I just thought, it's Superman. It's, going to do well. And I think its opening was okay, but it barely made, it didn't even make 400 million, just under 400 million. So very, very bad. And then we have Man of Steel that made about 650 million at the global box office. So why didn't Man of Steel make more money? Why didn't that reach $1 billion? Man of Steel had everything in its locker to make $1 billion. But here's the simple reason why it didn't. The collateral damage that Superman didn't give a shit about, that he was causing as well, and ultimately Superman killing Zod. These are the two main reasons why the film didn't make $1 billion. And Jonathan Kent, basically saying, why didn't you let those kids die, right? Things like that, and different little nitpicks that hardcore Superman fans had with the movie, but not just hardcore Superman fans, the general audience. They're the facts why Man of Steel didn't make more money. Man of Steel was closer to making $1 billion than Superman Returns was. Man of Steel is almost the perfect Superman movie. The problem with it is it's a contemporary Superman movie. It puts Superman in the real world. In reality, if you're a superhero and you're fighting Zod, you can't stop buildings from coming down at the same time. That's a fact. And, Goya and Nolan and Snyder are trying to make a realistic Superman. But that's not who Superman is. And that kind of shit doesn't work with Superman. It'll work with Batman because it worked with Nolan's Batman. It worked with Reeves' Batman. But it won't work with Superman. And that's why that movie didn't make $1 billion. Because if any contemporary modern day Superman movie was going to make $1 billion, it was going to be Man of Steel. Because apart from the problems that people had with it, it was an excellent contemporary Superman movie. So what will it take for a Superman movie to make $1 billion in the modern day. What do you have to do with Superman for him to be relevant and accepted and people rushing to go and see his movie? I think at the very beginning is going to be about how this movie is sold before we actually see and talk about what this film needs to be. People need to see a character that they can relate to, that it's the character that they want to see, but also that people can go and enjoy Superman and kind of like resonate with him, sympathize with him, have compassion for Superman and look up to him at the same time. This is why audiences, general audiences, rushed out to see Superman the movie back in '78. Now, Superman the movie finished on around $300 million. I think that's around the like $800 to $1 billion for these days. And don't forget, when you look at 300 million, because movies didn't make $1 billion back then anyway. But they didn't have the multiplexes, they didn't have the screens, you know, they didn't have IMAX, they didn't have 3D. Like, it's all changed now. So 300 million is outstanding for a film in 1978. Make no mistake about that. Superman the movie is literally, it's 78, $1 billion Superman movie. So I'm not talking about Superman the movie. Superman the movie is the pinnacle of success for Superman. And no one can ever question that. There's no good comparing that 300 million with the 650 million that Man of Steel made in 2013. A totally different situation, because with all the multiplexes and all the screens we've got today, Man of Steel should have been killing it in the box office. And ultimately, if you think 650 million is enough for a Superman movie, you're doing some serious mushrooms on a Sunday morning. Maybe you're frying those magic mushrooms, because I think when you fry the magic mushrooms, I think they go to your head a little bit deeper. Anyway, I'm joking. Not funny. Anyway, so a Superman movie. Superman is a recognizable character. Zaslav understands this. Gunn understands this. Everyone who knows what they're talking about knows. If you do Superman right, he does matter, he is relevant, and that's the whole thing. So, in terms of a Superman movie, he's got to be a hero, but you've got to have compassion for his backstory. He's an orphan. He's the ultimate immigrant. You know, he's always felt like he hasn't belonged all his life. And it comes to a point in Superman's journey where he does feel like a human being. He does feel like he's been accepted by, you know, like humankind. And I think it's important that you do the right things with Superman. And I think so many liberties were taken with him within the Snyderverse. And I think because of the mistakes that I pointed out with Superman Returns, Superman hasn't been given the opportunity to succeed. I've heard so many people say, oh, you know, Superman isn't relevant. You know, 2 movies, 3 movies if you count BVS as well, that have failed. But as I say, I can root into those 3 movies and tell you why they didn't make the $1 billion they needed to. And I'd say BVS deserved $1 billion. Man of Steel deserved $1 billion, but they took liberties with the character of Superman. I mean, Jesus Christ, BVS took liberties with Batman. I mean, oh my God, he's bloody branding people. You can defend that if you want, but come on. Again, I love Man of Steel, I love BVS, they're 2 of my favourite movies and comic book movies of all time. But you've got to understand why people complained. You've got to understand why those movies didn't make $1 billion. Warner Brothers, as a company, are in a position where they have to start pleasing people. They have to start making money. So they're going to do everything they can to make Superman Legacy be successful. Because if Superman Legacy isn't successful, Superman's done in live action. On the big screen, he will be. That's it. You know, there won't be any more opportunities for him, right? And, you know, DC Universe will be done as well. It's the entry point. It's important. It has to succeed. And I do believe that Superman Legacy, there's no reason why Superman Legacy can't make $1 billion. There's no reason. Get your casting right. Make sure it's the right casting. in lots of different ways. You know, that the actor resonates with the public like Henry did, like Brandon did, like Chris did. They've all kind of resonated, even on the small screen. Dean Cain, and to a higher extent, really, Tom Welling, who everyone loves, even to this day, as the character. Get your casting right, and you're on to a winner. James Gunn understands comics. There's no reason why he can't pull this movie off. So it's important that we see our first billion-dollar Superman movie. And there are reasons why we've never, ever had a billion-dollar Superman movie. It's not the character's fault. Many people, many experts, many journalists, many studio people, many people who work within the industry and outside of the industry actually believe that Superman's never made a billion-dollar movie in the modern day because he's not relevant and relatable. No. That's not on Superman. That's on you as a creative to make him relatable and make him relevant. He is relevant. He is relatable. He's a good guy. All you have to do is put interest and personality. You know, make him interesting, give him a personality. You know, literally, it's there. Christopher Reeve did it. They made the character interesting. He was a good, pure guy, but he could also be funny as Superman and funny as Clark. So you can do that. So it's all there. So basically saying that the current character is no longer relevant and no longer relatable is just a cheap excuse for people who have failed trying to make him successful. It's as simple as that. And somebody somewhere one day will really find find the recipe, like, when they created Coca-Cola, that special ingredient. One day someone's going to find the ingredient to make Superman $1 billion. And by God, as a Superman and DC fan, I sure hope it's James Gunn, because I'm 50 years old. If this fails, I'll probably never see another brand new Superman movie again. I'll accept it. I'll just watch the stuff I grew up with. I love Christopher Reeve. I love Henry Cavill. And I love the other actors who have played him. And, I can enjoy Superman Returns. But there's many reasons why Superman Returns didn't make $1 billion. It's more understandable why Superman Returns didn't make $1 billion than Man of Steel. Man of Steel was almost there. Almost the perfect Superman movie. Now, let's move on from Superman to Shazam. Shazam! Fury of the Gods just had its screening for the press, and David F. Sandberg was in attendance, as was the cast as well. So very, very soon, in the next few weeks, I don't know exactly when, we're going to get the press and critical reaction to Shazam! Fury of the Gods. The embargo will be up sooner rather than later. I don't think anyone's going to hate this movie. I don't think they're going to say it's the best thing ever, but I think they're going to enjoy it. They're going to say it's good. I can see this movie making around 70 to 75%, or however the score works on the Rotten Tomatoes verified critics meter. So I expect this to get solid reviews, not the best reviews, but not the worst reviews either. I believe this is totally a good time at the cinema. Now, saying all of that, I do believe the direction that they went with in the DCEU with Shazam was wrong. Now, I really enjoyed the first movie. I did. But the big problem with the Shazam franchise is that The Rock had a stranglehold on it. He was a producer, and his production company and his people literally ran the first Shazam movie, right? They were involved with New Line Cinema and WB and DC with that movie. So I love that movie, and it's great, and I'm happy that my nephews and nieces are still watching it and keep on asking me when the sequel's coming out. Next month, you're going to love it. But this could have been such a better universe without The Rock. Imagine it. You could have had Savannah as the villain still in the first movie, and in a post-credit, mid-credit or whatever scene, you can literally see Black Adam raised from his pit like we did in the Black Adam movie, right? So you set that up. in the sequel movie, the movie we're going to get now, you literally could have had Black Adam literally kick the living shit out of Shazam and the Shazam family. Then in the third movie, they have a rematch, and obviously the family and Shazam win. And at the end of that movie, you know, basically Billy Batson's come of age, and he passes on kind of like the Shazam name and the ability to become Shazam to another child, and it passes on. And then maybe that person, you know, creates a Shazam family as well. Perfect ending. Brilliant. It doesn't take much when you use your common sense. But unfortunately, The Rock didn't want that. Involving The Rock was the biggest mistake ever. Because then he wants to segregate Black Adam and Shazam. Because of his ego, he wanted to make Black Adam movies. He wanted to separate Black Adam from Shazam. We all know that Shazam should have showed up in the Black Adam movie. At the very least, in a post-credit scene. Or something. A mini fight. Something. But nothing. The Rock wasn't having any of it. And The Rock was always the biggest problem to the Shazam universe. He didn't just damage the Black Adam character, he damaged the Shazam franchise as well. Because there's no question, the Shazam franchise could have been a lot bigger than it is. And I still say, it's not bad. But what they decided to do, they decided to go down the Tom Hanks big route, which really isn't the comic book thing. I mean, there's versions in the modern day. I think the New 52 did it a lot like that. But the original Captain Marvel wasn't like that. And I think if they went down the Captain Marvel route without calling him Captain Marvel, because obviously you can't, because Marvel stole that name, but you could have done something a lot more powerful. And don't get me wrong, as I say, I'd still use Sivana in this franchise. Because Dr. Sivana, played by Mark Strong, is probably one of the strongest villains in the DCEU and one of my favourites. He was brilliant. Not only was he ruthless, but he was quite funny at times when he was being evil. Like the moment he chucks his brother out the window. I fucking loved that. I thought that was hilarious in a sick, twisted kind of way. So there's nothing wrong with David F. Sandberg. You know, David F. Sandberg is a really capable director. I love David. He's got a great sense of humour. He made a first great movie. Basically, Shazam is DC's Ant-Man. Ant-Man hasn't got the capacity to make a big box office. You notice how they made Kang front and centre in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania to try and upscale the box office. And even, I mean, I think the drop-off this weekend has been fucking huge. Even with Kang the Conqueror in it. That tells you all you need to know. But there's ways and means where you avoid these situations because, for example, if they allowed Edgar Wright to do his thing with the original movie, they wouldn't have ever been in this position. They moved Edgar on because of creative differences, because of the way they wanted to do things, and they made a big mistake. And that Ant-Man character can't come back from that. There'll be no more Ant-Man movies. You can't make another one unless you allow Edgar Wright to come back. And that's never going to happen unless, you know, Bob Iger goes, do you know what? We need to do this. But going back to DC, it's the same thing with Shazam. If you're a little bit comic book accurate and you actually cast somebody else to play The Rock, play Black Adam apart from The Rock, I think this franchise would have been in a much stronger position. So if you look at the projections now, they're down to what? 40, 45 million for an opening domestic weekend. That's clearly not a lot, but if this film gets really, really strong reviews and good reactions from the press, I think the box office will go up a little bit more. Now, I had an argument with someone where they were saying, oh, Shazam Fury of the Gods hasn't been marketed enough, the marketing's been bad, and that's why the projections are so low. No. Using, you know, a lack of marketing as an excuse for a film not being successful is such a cheap and lazy way and reasoning of giving for a movie failing or not being as successful as it could be. It's lazy and it's not true. Shazam! Fury of the Gods has been marketed all around the world. We've had 2 or 3 trailers, we've had TV spots. Now, has this movie been marketed as much as Black Adam? No. Because basically marketing is expensive. So if you start spending, if you go overboard with marketing, but you know it doesn't matter how much you market a movie and how many posters you put up there, it's still going to make the same amount of money, you don't bother. But I still think that the marketing for Shazam! Fury of the Gods has been pretty solid. But no, excuse me, but no, they're not going to overmarket this movie. Why should they? Why should they spend more on marketing than they're ever going to make on the movie? So you can understand that. So no, it hasn't, it's been marketed as much as they feel they need to market it. They may even feel that Shazam doesn't even have a future within James and Peter's new plan. So fuck it, just release it and try and make some money back on this film, which I think was always the plan. So it's not the lack of marketing, it's the lack of an interest. There is not that much interest in this version of Shazam. And finally today, I've been quite annoyed by a lot of the propaganda and hate about Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. The kind of responses and reactions, negative reactions we've had from test screenings, by the way. There's definitely a concerted campaign against Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, and it's because Amber Heard hasn't been cut from this movie. This is why. People want this film to fail because Amber Heard is in it. It's obvious. So if you're an intelligent DC fan or a fan of the first movie, you've got to ignore the negative propaganda for this movie. Take it from me. Yes, it's a slower paced movie. There's less action in certain places, but there is a wholesome kind of dynamic between Patrick Wilson's Orm and Jason Momoa's Arthur Curry. It's heartwarming, it's interesting, it's compelling. It really is good. So what you get from no action in certain places in the movie, you get a lot more soul. And, I think it's great. So you still get great action and great VFX like you did in the first movie. But I think, like the first movie, it was very emotional between, Arthur and his mother when they were reunited. And, the bonding between Mira and Arthur as well was really well done, considering the actors involved in that. James Wan did a really good job. I don't think that Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is a bad movie. And I think people having dialogue and building up characters and building up their relationships isn't boring. Personally, I grew up with that type of thing. It's up to you to decide when you see the movie or when you actually see a proper trailer for the movie. I think this will be a perfectly fine film. Whether or not it's going to be the success the first one is, who knows? I mean, it's not been released for a long time. But you really want to be careful in swallowing a lot of this negative propaganda about Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. Because as I say, the anti-Amber Heard people just want this movie to fail so they can say, you see, they should have cut her. Walter Hamada tried to cut Amber from this movie. She fought back. She didn't allow it. I don't know how she stopped it, but she did. The studio tried cutting her from this movie and it didn't work. Simple as that. If you watch the Depp and Heard trial, Walter Hamada testified, and you can't, he didn't lie on the stand, did he now? They tried. Now for me, I'm not on Johnny Depp's side and I'm not on Amber's side. This is none of my business. It's their relationship. Unfortunately, they've made it our business. The truth is, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard were both abusive to each other in their relationship. There's no good guy or bad girl. Basically, Amber Heard tried to make it look like she was some kind of victim and that Johnny Depp was 100% the aggressor. He was the aggressor, she was the aggressor. I don't give a shit about their fucked up, drugged up, alcoholic, abusive relationship. I don't care. But I do care about Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. I do care about James Wan's efforts and the actor's efforts, and even Amber's efforts, because she has gone in there and worked hard in what she's had to do. After all, she is in 20-25 minutes, maybe even half an hour of the movie, which is quite a lot. I personally don't want her cut from the movie because I think Mira needs to be there. They set her up wonderfully well in Justice League, in Zack Snyder's Justice League, and I want to see her in this movie. And they set her up well in the first Aquaman movie as well. You know, this universe is ending anyway, so they can deal with a recast for Amber and maybe a recast for Aquaman as well when this movie is over. But be careful. People are gunning for this movie because Amber hasn't been cut from it. I think this movie will end up being a pretty great DC and Aquaman movie. This has been Sunday's edition of the DC Universe Daily with me, Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss this beautiful perfection. And I'll see you again in the next video. Until I see you again, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.